Hello fellow game enjoyers, welcome to my channel so to speak. This is my very first post. Today we're going to be discussing repetition in video games, which is quite a lovely topic for a first video. Before we get started, I'd just like to say that I'd appreciate any feedback from you guys in the comments on how I did, maybe even things I could improve on after today's upload. If you enjoy the content, feel free to check me out and maybe leave a like. Alright, repetition in video games. The main thing in the gaming industry that has caused my expectations for new games to be pretty much non-existent. Every year it seems to get worse as more companies join the dark side of the industry. Repetition wouldn't be such a problem if new games copied elements that were successful from previous games and improved upon them. Maybe even mix them up a bit or combine them with other elements. However, at this current moment, repetition in gaming is so bad that some companies just release the same exact game every other year. These releases are done with slightly better graphics, and they still charge full price for them. That is just completely ridiculous and disrespects the fans who wait for new entries in the series that they love. This is the worst form of repetition in the industry, and it usually gets called out right away when companies do this. Yet unsurprisingly, it still happens constantly. Many sports games are guilty of this and find ways to monetize their games further to make the situation worse. The other form of repetition in gaming is when game studios find a formula that's impressive and brings them money, then all of a sudden they decide they want to shape their entire business model around it. These guys tend to copy this working formula across entirely different series too, pretending like it's some sort of crossover. The end result is the player initially being impressed by the new entries in a series they love. This love is short-lasting, however, as they get bored within the next few hours due to the story being nothing special, and the game also being similar to things they've already played. An easy example of this is Ubisoft games. Their games can be fun and creative at times, but they pretty much abuse the same formula constantly. Every game almost has open worlds with the exact same challenges, missions, and objectives. This is showcased even more by the lack of originality and depth in them with every new entry released. It's like they developed an amazing formula and go backwards with it instead of forwards. The content made is mediocre and still enjoyable for a few hours at best. I've been playing games since I was a kid, and it's really sad to see what games are becoming, especially with new technology constantly being made. I've seen games go from completely original, unique ideas to straight up clones of existing titles. A recent example of this happening is when the whole Battle Royale genre blew up. It all started with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which saw massive success when it launched. A few months later, almost every mainstream game was trying to have a form of Battle Royale inside of it, even if it made no sense. Companies were just greedy and wanted to profit off of the crazy hype and success other people were achieving. It's truly sad to see an outlet for such creative entertainment turn into something completely filled with greed. I haven't even brought up microtransactions or other ways the gaming industry tries to rob from its players yet. Those things don't even need to be the focus when the games themselves are no longer of such strong quality they can stand up on their own. What makes this even worse is the fact that with some titles it takes years for them to come up with a new entry, despite it being pretty much the same game as the last. How unfair is it that people spend extended periods of time waiting for something to be revealed to them only for it to become a massive letdown? Games today sometimes take half a decade or more to produce, and that just makes the whole situation even more frustrating. When looking at the big picture, it's easy to see that the main source of this issue in games are companies being money hungry, maximizing profits, laziness, and stress from investors. Money is generally the main issue with game repetition, because if everyone was interested in creating a game that feels like a unique experience, plenty would fail and money would be lost. Companies want to go with what is already proven to work and has been shown in the past to make them money. Sometimes this can get to an embarrassing point where they even include loot boxes and forms of gambling in games. Games that even kids sometimes play and lose money inside of. Many AAA game studios also have to crunch in endless hours and make changes to their product to satisfy investors. This is probably the most annoying of the reasons because developers work hard to create something they envisioned, but get betrayed by the corporate side of things. Cyberpunk 2077 and its release is possibly the best example of this happening to a game. Originally, the studio wanted to make a revolutionary game with a feature list that seemed unreal at the time it was announced all the way back in the early 2010s. However, What we actually got was a fairly enjoyable game that was fun at times, but it was missing so many things that were promised. On top of this, it was broken at launch and needed plenty of updates to finally reach a place where it could be played without any glitches getting in the way. The story and core elements were pretty strong, but it just didn't add up to what people expected, which is probably why nobody talks about it anymore. Now let's switch it up a little bit and look at ways companies can avoid creating a repetitive experience. There will always be some sort of repetition in games because plenty of things have already been done, but what matters is if it's done in a way that feels unique. The first way I believe that a game can avoid feeling repetitive is by having a strong story. Even if the elements inside feel familiar, a non-cliche story with powerful moments that has the ability to keep the player interested will carry everything else. This can be seen in plenty of story-based games that do not have many gameplay elements, yet people still enjoy them due to the narrative. If the person playing is constantly curious to figure out what happens next, they will enjoy the experience no matter what. The second way I believe games can avoid being repetitive is by trying new things. This means mixing up gameplay elements that fans are used to. This can be a risky tactic, but could also lead to massive success. If developers looked at their strongest points in their games and found ways to evolve it, they can create new gameplay elements. The final way that I think games can avoid repetition is by more time being taken with them. Games that could be enjoyable are ruined if the same thing is released pretty much every single year. A wait between games can make players even more excited for the next game, will give time for the series to breathe, and also allow studios to take more time to make a refined experience. An example of a game that was released very recently that goes against the recent trends of repetition is Elden Ring. It's actually the game that's displayed in the background while I discuss this subject. Elden Ring takes the previous games made by FromSoft, the studio behind it, and combines it into a massive unique experience. This is emphasized by how all the previous games they made before it were linear and level based, while this game was upgraded to open world. Many were not sure if this would be a good step for the series to take, but they took the risk and succeeded with it. They also improved the experience by having references to their previous games scattered across this one, while adding in new mechanics that make the game feel fresh. The gameplay is not the only thing that is well received in this game. The art style is also a main feature when people look at this title. Everything from the creatures to story design were carefully crafted and designed to fit into the world for players to explore on their own. In conclusion, repetition has become a sad factor in the gaming industry and needs to be improved. The likeliness of it becoming better is low, and companies always tend to prioritize money over what is made. It is important for players to voice their frustration with the amount of repetition in games and not give away their money easily, even though it may be tempting for certain titles. While they may not be of the highest quality gameplay-wise or in terms of graphics, indie games are often a nice solution to escape this problem. Plenty of indie games, often made by one person or a small team, are made out of passion rather than hopes of making money. They are also more likely to contain abstract themes and feel different from the average game. Sadly, many indie developers are underrated and don't get the love they deserve, so it's nice to check them out every once in a while. Occasionally, indie titles blow up on platforms like Steam because they are just that impressive. Hopefully, companies learn from outraged fans that repetition is not the right future for video games and begin to make changes.